Welcome back to another episode of Hope for Your Life, where we believe there's always hope, no matter what circumstance you're going through. In our last episode, we talked about suicide prevention, and you met my guest, Jules Christian, who is the chaplain for Volunteers of America for both the Chesapeake and Carolinas, and Tamika Magagula. She is the Operations Director for Volunteers of America in the Virginia region, and also an independently licensed clinician. We were talking about the prevention of suicide in last episode. In this episode, we want to talk about how do you cope with suicide loss. You've experienced suicide loss in your family, with friends, maybe even a coworker. How do we cope with that loss? And the first question I have for either of my guests, is there a different kind of grief that comes with suicide loss? Does that differ from other losses in any way? And just kind of explain that if you see a difference there.
Yes, thank you so much, Pastor Johnson. There is a different kind of grief and loss because this loss could have been prevented. And though it may have happened because of health issues or illness or whatever, we always tend to think, what could I have done? Why did this person choose this? Or is there something else that could have intervened? And so there's a lot more self-blame, guilt, remorse, unanswered questions. And so oftentimes it's a lot harder and takes longer to heal from this kind of loss.
And in addition, because of that guilt, we feel more despair and we even feel anger because of the situation that occurred and our perceived lack of, maybe not responding appropriately or in ways that we wish we could have.
Very good points. Jules, coming back more kind of the spiritual angle of this, do you find that the stigma around suicide is sometimes heightened by religious views about suicide?
Absolutely. Let's face it. Sometimes church people like to put on the mask. They like to smile and say everything's fine, and that's just not reality. And so, you can help break down the stigma by being honest about how you feel, by engaging others in conversations surrounding suicide, depression, anxiety, and mental health, because one story at a time, one honest expression at a time, we can help break down the stigma.
Yeah, and what would you say to help a person who's struggling in their grief because of a, highly stigmatized view?
There is a judgment and a misconception among people of faith that if someone takes their life, then they're doomed for all eternity. And I just want you to know that God is much bigger than that. God understands our hurts and our pain, and we never really know all of the factors that lead a person to take their life. In fact, in the scriptures, in Hebrews, in the chapter of faith, Hebrews 11, it talks about a man named Samson who took out his life and the lives of others, and yet he is in the hall of faith. And so God knows the final story, and we have to press against this judgment for people who have taken their life.
Okay, thank you for that, Jules. Tamika, I've read that people who have experienced a loss by suicide are at increased risk of having suicidal thoughts themselves. Why is that?
Well, I think that goes back to the factors that are associated with grief. That feeling of despair, and that feeling of despair can be generated by feelings of guilt. Again, I should have seen something. Why didn't I notice the signs? What role did I play or not play in this? And so when you're looking down that dark hole, when you have that type of tunnel vision, sometimes some folks see that as the only way out.
Yeah, so to really get to the nuts and bolts of, how do we cope? And that's the question. What are some healthy ways, and this is for both of you to respond to, what are some healthy ways to cope with losing someone to suicide?
First of all, take off the expectations of how you should grieve or how healing should look. Be honest about your feelings. Reach out for help. Talk to someone. Comfort yourself. Know that healing is a process and a journey.
In addition, please be gentle with yourself. Do some very basic self-care. Remember to eat. Remember to bathe. Remember to just hydrate yourself. Maybe even exercise if you can. But again, allow yourself that space to process what's happened.
And just as a follow-up question, what would you say to someone, because you mentioned, we can blame ourselves for that. What would you say to someone who blames themselves for not noticing signs or doing enough to save their loved one?
We have to allow folks to express themselves. It's so easy to say, no, it wasn't your fault. And of course it's not, but you have to allow a person to express how they feel and then comfort them and then speak the truth to them.
And again, at the risk of being repetitive, be gentle with yourself. We are all wonderfully, beautifully human, okay? We are not perfect beings, so we won't notice everything all of the time. But all we can do is the best that we can in His name.
I love both of those responses. And we are all wonderfully, beautifully human. That really stands out to me. And I really hope we all take this to heart. This is a very serious topic. And I just want all of us who may be experiencing grief from suicide loss or maybe be having those thoughts themselves, really just think about what we've talked about here. Be gentle with yourselves. Know that you are loved, you're cared for. And Jules, I really appreciate that spiritual perspective. The God that I worship, I believe, loves us all. And we all are loved. And there's always hope. There's always hope. I do also want to remind you of that number to call, 988. That will get you some help if you're really at a point where you're thinking about doing something. Don't, take action, and there is help for you. Again, we thank you for joining us for this episode of Hope for Your Life. We hope that this has been enriching and that this has been a help to you. And I want to thank my guests again, Tamika and Jules, for coming to participate and help us to talk about this very important topic. We want you to subscribe to this channel, click that notification bell so that you can be alerted to the next episode. We've got another great topic coming for you in the next episode. Again, you can suggest topics by going to our website, hopeforyourlife.com, and you can suggest whatever topics you want to talk about. We will receive those and we will address your topic. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at the next episode.